Good morning and welcome back to Let Them Fly with Heather Harris. Today I've got guest Toni in studio with me, and we're looking at all about revision and some ways to study and English and psychology and very experienced teachers. So we're going to explore lots of things that we all really want to know. So, Toni, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into teaching. Let's start there.
Oh gosh, it feels like a long time ago now. Essentially, when I was young, I really loved English. I've always loved doing things like writing and reading obsessively. And I really thought I wanted to be an English teacher until I studied it for A-level, and it kind of killed it off for me a little bit, I'm not going to lie. And so I also discovered psychology sort of at random at A-level. And I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with the subject. I found I was kind of good at it, surprisingly. I didn't expect to be, because it's, very science focused, and it wasn't something that I'd really done before. So after my A-levels, I studied psychology at university, and again, absolutely loved it. But I just really didn't find the thing that I really wanted to do just yet. So I discovered something called Teach First, which is a training program for teachers. And the idea of that is to go into the sort of most underprivileged schools in the UK. And, as a young, enthusiastic graduate, kind of bring what you can in that sense. And it really opened my eyes to the sort of challenges that students face in the classroom, but outside the classroom, and how those, environmental factors really can be a barrier to education. And it made me incredibly passionate about supporting children from all walks of life, and making sure that whatever I do as a teacher is all about removing those barriers and being a part of building up their confidence and their knowledge, and then at the end of the day, their progress, so that they can do their absolute best. And so then I was an English teacher originally, even though my degree was psychology, and then have been setting up GCSE psychology at previous school, head of department, and took on a pastoral role at previous school in the UK as head of year 11, which I absolutely loved. It was hard work, looking after kids and their well-being, and supporting, like say, all those different aspects of their lives, not just within school, that can be barriers to their progress and personal growth too. So yeah, all of those factors are really important to me as a teacher. And here we are 8-9 years later, I think. Feels like a long time.
It's really scary, isn't it? The teaching years, they just fly.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like 5 seconds since I was a newbie. And then also if I, sometimes I'm asked to say what subjects I've covered and things like that. And the list is literally endless. I started in English. I've been head of theatre studies for some reason. Whether I'm qualified or not, I'm not entirely sure. I've, covered MSc, Moral Social Cultural Studies, here in the UAE, which was a new one to me, but fantastic. I've taught all sorts of life skills and things like that. So yeah, it's really cool how in teaching there's always an opportunity to do something new, which is great when you can get a little bored easily. So it's always fun.
And I think what I love about you as a teacher is that you're just so enthusiastic, you're so dedicated. It just spills out whenever we see you approaching students. It's amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I always tell the story of one of my first ever teaching groups that they said to me, it must have been May, June time of our first year together. And they said, Miss, when we met you, we thought you were really scary. And I'm like, okay, good. I've set the boundaries. And then they said, but now we know you're just a big nerd. And I was like, brilliant. Thank you. So, my I think my whole thing is I love what I teach. I love teaching, but I also love what I teach. I will talk about books. I will talk about psychology all day long, and the kids have to stop me, basically. So
that's really great. I mean, a passionate teacher is just the best teacher, because you're not just passionate about your subject, you're passionate about the students as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's so important.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think seeing how kids progress and how they grow and learn to love a subject that originally they will tell you they hate is one of the best things that you can do.
And I think psychology is one of those, where they come in with these ideas of being able to read people's minds, and then suddenly it wasn't about that at all.
It's a tricky one. I find I recently had a conversation with a student who said, when are we going to learn the fun stuff, like schizophrenia? I was like, whoa, hold your horses a little bit, and it is funny. I think I kind of had the opposite with English, where they come in obviously learning it from a young age and thinking, oh, it's boring, Shakespeare books, whatever. And then they kind of love it when we do, the good books. Whereas psychology, they come in, like you say, thinking, I'm going to read minds, I'm going to manipulate people. And then I teach them, here's what a neuron is and here's how the brain is structured. And they're less interested in brain structure than I would think. I loved learning about the brain, but they're less interested. And it's a bit of a tricky one to be like, no, I promise this is interesting. I know right now you don't think it is, but I promise that it is.
I think it's quite a lot of theories, isn't it, in psychology?
Yes, it's a lot of content. And because it's something that is essentially, the skills are essentially untouched until you pick it up in either usually year 10, sometimes year 9 if you're lucky, but they're completely new topics and skills. So when they start, it's incredibly overwhelming. Depending on which specification you do, you're looking at 8 or 9 topics that they've never touched. We're talking about like why and how sleep works, or, the structure of the brain and the central nervous system. These are like really challenging topics. When I first studied in A-level, because there wasn't a GCSE, and this is only a decade ago, So now bringing it down to GCSE, it is incredibly challenging. And I find that it takes a little while for it to click. And I will always say that to students, particularly that I tutor, sort of saying, I'm desperate, my mocks are terrible. And I always find that it does take a while to click with the maturity of going into year 11, as well as the time that it takes to collect all that information and the sort of methodology around how you talk about psychology. It does take that bit of time, but it does click eventually. Yeah.
How valuable do you think psychology is as a subject?
Oh gosh, I personally love it because I think it's fascinating, because I think people are weird, and that's great to learn about. But for me, when you study psychology, yes, we learn some topics that may not seem that interesting. But for example, one of my favorite topics is developmental psychology, which is essentially understanding how children go from, babies where they have no language, they have not really much cognitive capacity and things like that. And then they get to, the age of like 14, and they can suddenly have these incredible abstract and hypothetical conversations, and we're learning how people learn, and that's so interesting. So if you're a big sister, a big brother, or if you're a parent, or if you're working with young people, you want to be a teacher, developmental psychology is a huge part of being a teacher, and educational psychology if you continue with the study. And then, of course, you've got things like language, thought and communication, which is all about, well, it's kind of the mind reading side of things. It's the reading the body language, thinking about the different types of communication that we use, verbal and non-verbal. And then all within that, you're essentially just learning how people work. And it's a huge thing as a young person to figure out the world, not just from your own perspective, but someone else's perspective. And then how you can make those perspectives, sounds super manipulative, but how you can make them work for you, and how you can befriend people, and how you can, be in a workplace, or, make judgments and things like that. So there's so many skills, not just the things that go into the exam paper, but there's so many skills that you pick up from psychology. I personally think it's
one of those lovely subjects that sits along so many sets of different. You can do it science, you can do it humanities, you can do it art even. It does fit in with lots of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously when, at the moment we are talking about children learning to sit an exam, which isn't, everyone's favourite thing. But those skills are a big part of it. The writing skills, the scientific reasoning skills, all of that sits alongside whatever other subjects that you're learning about. Yeah.
And I know nowadays you teach English as well. Mm-hmm. So we're going to leave the psychology for a minute, which I have to say is absolutely fascinating. But you were an English exam board marker for a while, is that right?
Yes, I have marked for the English exams. I'm going to start with, I do like marking because I always love to see the progress from students. Exam marking is hard. It's a big old task. We get, depending who you're working for, but you get around 300 exam papers as just your basic, and then you can take on more. But that is so overwhelming sometimes to look at, and you open them, and it can be a bit of a slog, to be honest, but it is so worth it as a teacher. Oh my goodness, I learned so much as an examiner, what the exam board are looking for. Because obviously I've marked things prior, my own students' work, but having to mark students' work that you've never met the kid, you don't know who it is, and see and try and figure out what they're going for one, and then fitting it into the criteria in a way that the exam board, it's you do mark on your own, but then it's corroborated by other markers and things like that. So then, you have discussions around, okay, why did you give this mark and I gave this mark, So you learn an awful lot from it. And then, of course, that means I take that back to the classroom and I'm like, guys, this is what they're looking for. This is the stuff that I was trained to identify and to award for and to not award for, the things that we might have thought they would want. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's something different. So it's an incredibly valuable experience for myself and for my students.
I think the anonymity of marking exams, because I think when you know the student, you kind of know what they're getting at, even if that's not what they've written. So you're kind of in your mind, you think, Jack wrote such and such, and this is what he was getting at. But of course, when there's no name and you don't know the student, they've got to write it correctly.
Yeah, and we're all guilty of it as teachers. I know that I taught that lesson where I said the rest of the sentence that they didn't include in their essay, want to help our students. We want to, and I will always, when I'm marking, fill in that bit of the sentence that they missed, sure. But it does mean that when you have that blind version, it's really quite, interesting to figure out and to also see as a teacher, again, what we take back to our student, the different techniques that other teachers have clearly taught them, like essay structure and things like that. And you think, oh, that's really interesting that they've clearly been taught to structure in this way, use these particular skills, and to see how each different version of teaching it fits into the exam criteria. It's very interesting.
And you do literature and language?
Yeah, I've trained for both. COVID prevented me from actually marking the language for too long. But yeah, I mean, I love marking literature. It's just the one that I find more interesting myself. I love books, basically. Language, because obviously, depending on which mark scheme you're doing, you have it's a fairly short piece of text that the students will analyse in the first half. And then you've got your creative side in the second half. I do love the creative side. It's really interesting. When I teach it to students, particularly as a tutor, and as we get toward the sort of end of year 11, I do talk heavily about maturity, because it is the creative part. You've got to either do something like write a speech, like something persuasive, and then the other half is to write like a descriptive, maybe like a story. And I find that as soon as they hear the word story, it becomes once upon a time, I got up for school. And unfortunately, I'm like, these kids are 16 and I know that they can write better than that. And something just seems to happen sometimes in the exam. So I really like to talk about the necessity of that maturity, the creative writing. And the first half with the text, because it's, a slightly shorter piece of text, you get fairly repetitive answers. So, when you're marking 300, they all get a little bit the same. But for students, what is really good is it does make it a little easier to stand out. If you have something perceptive to say, then that could really make a difference when your examiner is getting a little bit bored and they go, oh, that's an interesting new idea. And then the literature, of course, I'm such a book nerd. I absolutely love reading. I love every book. So it's cool to see you get a little bit more variety in the answers. I do think because it's often a 30 or 40 mark question, depending on your exam board, students get a little bit lost and maybe a little bit scared of the size of the question. So preparing for it is really, really important. But when you get someone who clearly has read the book and got the book, that's such a nice feeling as a teacher to think there's kids out there that do get it and that have, taken it on as well as they could have. So yeah, it's a really interesting, you've got like a sort of a big picture marking thing, and then you've got this almost ladder of skills that you see the students build up through the paper. So it's really interesting to mark the two different sides and see how different the skills are. English has such a wide range of skills across the two.
And can I ask, what's your favourite book for the English literature textbooks that they're studying?
Oh, that's such a difficult question. I would have said Lord of the Flies a few years ago because I absolutely adored that book. I learned it myself at GCSE and adored it. And then I taught it too many times, I think. And after a few years running, switched over to an Inspector Calls, and I absolutely adore an Inspector Calls. It's just so brilliant. And I love the fact that it still makes me want to, do a march today. It's really exciting.
And it's funny because I think as an adult, we see that, but I think for a child, they go, it's Inspector Calls. Why am I doing Inspector Calls?
Yeah, that's true. I taught it the first time during COVID. I had studied the book before, but never as a teacher. And I chose it during COVID. I can't remember the reason, maybe because it's quite short, I suppose. And I taught it over Zoom calls. And this was with a class that I had not had for too long, and they were super quiet. They did not want to talk to me. There was just lots of different students. They didn't really gel too well. And I found, and this is where I started loving online teaching, they were the most vocal they've ever been in the chat box. But honestly, it was back and forth, constant conversation about this text. And I think I had a lot of young girls in there who really kind of felt a lot of the emotional trauma that some of the characters faced in there. Even though it's an old text, they still related to it. And it was so good to see. And when we got back after online teaching, they were so great in the classroom. I was so happy that they found the way that they could communicate. And because they bonded over this text, we as a class just gelled, and it was really great. So I love that.
That's so lovely. When that happens, that's your moment of teaching where you just go, yes, I hit that point.
Yeah, definitely. It was nice.
So the other thing I know you teach, and you teach for us, particularly is study skills. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. And I'm a great believer that, there's two things students need to know. One, they need to know the content, but two, they need to know how to be able to actually study. So they need the learning part, and they need to know how to write the exams. Now, I know you cover all of that. Tell me a bit about your best advice for students when they have to study, because there's an awful lot to learn, isn't there? It's a mountain to it.
Yeah, I think when we look at a timetable, how many subjects students have, and then within each subject, there are so many different skills, and then, of course, the content on top of it. So for me, I think the thing with studying is having studied psychology and how memory works, essentially. And any students that study psychology, they will cover this. Your brain encodes information in various formats. So we might have it in an auditory manner, in a visual manner, spatial manner. The most important thing is semantics, so the meaning of the stuff that you're learning. There was a theory a while ago about learning styles that has kind of been debunked, in the sense of, if I wanted to teach you, my goodness, let's say geography, which is not my specialty, if I wanted to tell you what the UK looks like, I wouldn't describe it to you. I wouldn't tell you it. You wouldn't listen to it auditorily. I would show you a picture, because that makes the most sense. So what we want to do is look for the type of encoding that is going to help lead toward that semantic understanding. And further to that, when you are recapping topics that you have covered, transforming into different styles of encoding is so incredibly useful. So when I look at study skills with students, I will always cover the different techniques that we do. So, flashcards are an old faithful. They're not my favourite, but I think that they're really useful. But I love anything that has movement, anything that you can physically, lift a flap on a page or post-it notes, things like that. Those are really great. And then also transforming it into something like a mind map, something that's super visual, something that's got that spatial kind of movement to it. It's the same information as an essay, but it means that in your brain, what's essentially happening is you have these, connections between the different schemas and the different knowledge that you have. And the more different ways that you build those connections, the easier it is to recall them. And that's essentially what we need to do. So my best advice is to take whatever information you have and transform it into as many different ways, essentially, as you can. Obviously, that also includes the essays, which I know are the most boring version, but we do need to practice the longer answers and things like that. But once you've got the little bits in your brain together, maybe it's through pictures, maybe it's through sound bites, whatever, it will be so much easier to put it on the page in the full sentences that you need for the exam.
I think, for me, the worst child is the one that comes with beautifully written notes that they've literally copied, colour-coded. Their revision notes are immaculate. They're beautiful, but they've copied text directly from a book, and then they can't remember it. And that's because, in the way you're saying, that's because they haven't encoded it.
Yeah, essentially, we can look at a wall of text all day long, but your brain is not going to remember that. And the example that I love to use, having done like theatre and stuff when I was a kid, if you were learning a play and you always had the script in your hand, and then you got on stage and took the script away, your brain has never had to fill in the blanks. Yes. So before you get to the big day, before the big show, the exam, you have to make your brain fill in the blanks. So if you're always looking at the wall of text, there's no blanks there, it's all there. Whereas if you do it as a mind map, if you do it, flashcards, hiding it from yourself, cover the answer, those things that seem really simple and almost old-fashioned, they are the ways that you force your brain into recall and strengthening those neural pathways that will bring the memories back.
So it's association, isn't it? Yeah. The more you try to remember a paragraph of text that's just irrelevant to anything, the less likely that's going to happen. And then what other techniques do you suggest for studying? Come on, let's Yes, spill all.
So I think my favourite one to recommend is called blurting, which is kind of what it says on the tin, where you basically blurt out everything that you know, do it onto a piece of paper. Scruffy, and this is something that I always say to students. I will tell them if this piece is going to be pretty or scruffy, because some students will immediately think, okay, I've got to get my pens out, I've got to get my ruler out, I've got to make it gorgeous.
Colours, yes.
Exactly. And I love that. I love colour. It's brilliant. But not every piece of your revision can be beautiful, because you will never get anything done. You will start again and you'll keep that in a frame and you'll never use it. So blurting is a scruffy technique. Grab a piece of paper, set yourself a timer and a topic. Nothing too massive. So I wouldn't just do psychology. I might do memory as one of the units. And then you set yourself a timer, 2 to 4 minutes, potentially, depending how big the topic is, and write down every single thing that you can possibly think of, just absolute word vomit onto the page, all messy, however you want it to look, basically. And then after the timer is up, you get out your textbook or your exercise book or your web page, and you grab a different colour pen and you fill in the bits that you forgot. And that is so brilliant, because you are essentially testing yourself, for one, which we have to do regularly. With your different colour pen, you are giving yourself a new revision list. Everything that you've just written in a different colour, you now know you have to go back and check over. And we're also practicing things like time pressure and exam, the things that we have to face in the exam, because you've got that timer there, you've got it watching you. And I think a big part of what prevents students from studying is they think, oh, it's going to be 4 hours of writing out things. And that doesn't have to be the case. That can be a 20-minute activity. The same with things like if you want to do something that's kind of like flashcards, so you've got that movement and that cover the answer thing. This is really difficult to explain over a podcast, but essentially it's about folding paper in a way that you hide the answer under flaps, kind of like a kid's pop-up book sort of thing. Yeah. So you can do it in like a sort of star shape, or you can use post-it notes if you write some answers on the page and then pop your post-it note over the top with the question on top. These are really good because flashcards, they take a really long time to write out. Students don't always use them appropriately, and you can lose them really easily. If you've got a wedge of 45 flashcards, drop them, they're gone. Whereas this, you can have it in a book with these sort of flaps and things like that. Or I like to, in an exercise book, kind of fold the corners in, so you create these two big spaces that you can write underneath. And it just means that every time you get to that page, it's hidden from you and you've got to test yourself before you can look at it. So these elements of doing the test, quick test, see where you are and what you're missing, and then you go back and look at those bigger things. Like YouTube videos are phenomenal. You're doing auditory processing and encoding. And what's really great is, yes, you've listened to your teacher, and I will tell you now, the teacher is the expert, absolutely. But it's very helpful to hear it in a different way. So tutoring is great because you can have someone else teach you the same stuff, just in a slightly different method, and that can just help click.
It just consolidates it. It's the going over, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I love, find the expert YouTube channel for your subject. I know the one for English, I know the one for psychology that are brilliant. And they're usually shorter than a lesson. You're talking 12 minutes probably. And that's so great because, again, students do not need to sit for 4 hours on the same thing. So these little chunks are super, super effective. And when it comes to organising a revision timetable, those chunks should be considered. I will recommend the Pomodoro technique and breath, because it's students, it's overwhelming how much they have to cover. So breaking it down into 20-minute segments. And then in terms of your memory, we all know that if you step away from something, you need a break from that. But when you do step away from something, it allows your brain to embed that information into your long-term memory. So Pomodoro method, if you're not familiar, is 20-minute chunks with a 5-minute break in between. And then after 4 of them, you take a longer break. There's apps for it. There's a whole website about it. But each 20-minute, I always recommend, should be a different topic. It should be a different thing, because you let your psychology settle into your long-term memory whilst you're working on your maths or whatever. And that's a really good method. And again, because it's little short stints, far more manageable for students in terms of not being terrified of making a start.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things is that students, exactly like you say, parents are like, oh, they're upstairs, they're revising for 4 hours. There's no child that's sitting for 4 hours revising.
That is very correct. Another thing that's great about the Pomodoro method, you can get apps that will physically lock your phone. I just discovered this recently. There are YouTube videos that are timed the Pomodoro timer. They play music. Some of them do, some of them don't. If you prefer music, if you don't. But they also do like a chime when it's the start and when it's the end and things like that. And it's just a really good way to force yourself into this is the revision time. 4 hours is too much in one. No one can do it.
You can't be motivated to do it.
Exactly. I know I can't do it, so I don't know why I would ask a 16-year-old to, but you can go, I can do 20 minutes. Yeah. That's fine. And then I get a 5-minute break and I can scroll on my phone, or I can, and another one I will recommend, please leave your desk if you're doing, your 5-minute break, leave the desk, walk around the house, do a quick lap, grab something to eat, and then go back to your space. Make that your space where your brain is working. But yeah, it's just a far more manageable way for students to do that.
And don't pick your phone up and go on social media, because that's never 5 minutes.
Absolutely. That is the thing. Phone is good because it breaks you away from the thinking. Sometimes we need our brains to like melt into nothingness a little bit. But yes, the doom scrolling is absolutely a thing. But that's why the YouTube video with the timer or the app, it will literally turn your phone like you can't use it. So it's really helpful. So you're like, right, okay, now I physically can't use the thing that I want to be using. I've got to be studying, So there are good ways to kind of, it's a bit, Pavlov's dogs. You're gonna right now I'm into revision mode and things like that. So lots of timers and things out there to help it feel less overwhelming and keep you in that structure. And you're going to feel so accomplished when you do them as well. Big thing is obviously reward yourself. If at every 20-minute task you get a cookie, you go and get yourself a cookie. I do not mind. Okay, maybe something a bit healthier, maybe some carrots.
Cookie. It works.
But rewarding yourself, it's hard. What you're doing is hard. So rewarding yourself for those things are super important. Giving yourself that little brain break is super important. Yeah.
And what would be your top tip to motivate students to actually revise?
Do you ask this from a student perspective or a parent perspective?
Let's start with the student.
Okay. As a student, I think it is about finding the thing that is your intrinsic motivator. So we all love a reward. Personally, mine's donuts. Don't worry about it. But we all love an external reward, absolutely. But we need to find the thing within us that feels like an accomplishment. And that can be really tricky if, this subject isn't necessarily for you, absolutely. But when you see the progress that you have made, that is such a big motivating factor. So my biggest advice for students is never compare your grade mark to another person in the classroom. What you should be doing is having yourself a little list of every time you've done a test or a quiz or anything like that. Just jot down the thing that you got, the mark, whatever it was, and you will see the progress. You will see where it goes up, even if it's 1 mark each time. And it sounds silly, but it's going to give you that little warm fuzzy feeling that otherwise you might not have noticed if you didn't check what you got last time, not what you and the person got this time, what you yourself got last time compared to now. And if it goes down, we shouldn't be scared, but we should use that as an, okay, what am I missing? What am I lacking? Yeah. So, motivation, yes, absolutely reward yourself, do the fun things, have the fun treats, but look for the thing in your own progress that will motivate you internally. It's going to feel really good because you're the one doing the hard work. Yes, teachers are also doing hard work. I'm not teachers are doing hard work as well. But students are doing the hard work at the end of the day, and they're going to sit through those exams and they're going to be really tough. So they need to feel as though they really worked themselves, and they can be proud of what they came out with, and that's the way to do it. Yeah.
And in terms of you saying, see what you're doing, see your progress, do you suggest they draw little hour charts to show the hours they've studied or something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, fabulous. Things like that are great. Having, for a Pomodoro, I would always have, I'm such a visual person, so I would physically have a timetable. You tick it off, highlight it. Maybe even highlight it with what colour you feel like it was that time. Oh, it was a red one. I didn't do too well. I didn't work too hard. Or green. Yes, I nailed that subject. Those things are great. Anything where you're mapping the changes that you've made and obviously ticking off where you've done the thing that you have told yourself you're going to do is going to make you, feel really good. I have them for myself during the day just to remind me to do things.
Exactly. Nothing wrong with it, yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I highly recommend doing those things.
And I'm going to ask that the question that all the parents ask is how many hours a week should students be revising and when should they start?
Start now, start yesterday, start 3 weeks ago is my first answer. No, I have every single year on results day, a student will say to me, I wish I'd started revising sooner. And I know it sounds like an old wives' tale at this point, but I promise to you that I have had it every single year. Someone says it to me. So I always recommend starting as soon as you can, essentially. In terms of hours a week, that is a difficult one to put a number on, in the sense that there are other things that are important. Obviously, family setup and things that are happening at home, those things, take priority quite a lot of the time. And I will never recommend that students drop things like sporting activities or hobbies. If they are things that are completely all-consuming, then they may have to be reduced. I will tell students, year 11 is going to suck. It's going to be rubbish. But it will be worth it in the end when you get your grade. It is going to be hard work. But you should still be doing sports. If you do sports, if you don't, go for a walk every now and again. You need to have that exercise and those endorphins. In terms of hours, I always recommend to plan for evenings during the week to be filled with however many Pomodoro chunks you can fit in. That's how I always kind of math it, in a sense. And these things will depend on your family situation and your hobbies, but there should be some kind of learning every day, because the more that you revisit something, even if you only have an hour, is still making those connections and building those, neurological pathways. So it should be touched every day. However many hours you can afford is important. And then also you have to do a little bit of maths on how many subjects you have in order to cover them all. So putting a number on it is incredibly difficult, but I would say that students do need to be touching something every day. And when there is a big chunk of time available, we're trying to get the GCSEs here. We're trying to make the progress and do the best we can. So you've got to use that time. You've got to kind of fill it up as much as you can with reasonable breaks.
Yes, and I think you're right that if it's 20 minutes, you've always got 20 minutes. You've got 20 minutes before supper. Mum, when supper ready, 20 minutes. Right, I'm going to do 20 minutes. If you're setting yourself a target, you could only start with an hour. It's much harder to fit that in. But 20 minutes can be fitted in the car going to school or at any point. And I think, you're absolutely right. So they start as early as they possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, with the whole as well, we have some students who are the other end of the spectrum where they are so conscientious, they want to do every waking minute revising, to which I would say get some sleep at some point. There needs to be a cut-off. Children need 8 to 10 hours of sleep in order to be productive and for their brains to be functioning at a high enough level to do the work.
And they don't want to burn out before the exam.
Absolutely,
yeah. We see a lot of those students that come February, they're actually over it. And that's too soon. We need them to peak in May, not in February.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I guess we're having this conversation, slightly early in the academic year. So for me, I'm saying, yes, do a bit every day, but it shouldn't be, 5-6 hours every day, because it's like you say, you'll burn out, it's overwhelming, and you need to allow for the other things to also be important.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to touch, because I'm so excited for you. I know you've published a book and you're in the process of your second book, and I want you to just to explain, how do you actually just sit down and write a book?
Thank you for mentioning it. It's one of those funny things that is, funnily enough, very similar to making yourself revise. You kind of do just have to make yourself sit and write words. I read Stephen King's autobiography, obviously phenomenal author, prolific author, who talked about when he first started writing, he set himself a challenge of 2,000 words per day. And even if he couldn't leave his desk until he hit his 2,000. So if he hit it at 9 a.m, great, day's yours. If he hits 2,000 words mid-sentence, he will just stop, which to me is insane. I could never do that. My memory is too bad. I'd forget where I was. But those things, it's, same as with students and revision. I literally have myself a checklist of what I do every day in terms of how many words I write, how many pages I edit, things like that. At the minute, I'm in the editing phase of my second book. It's a novella, so it's a little bit longer. And it's, weird to read over your own stuff. And I think that's something that students can probably relate to as well, where you think, oh, is this any good that I actually did? So it's really difficult to find the confidence in yourself to put it out into the world. And it's been a little bit of a struggle personally, I don't mind sharing. But it's been really gratifying to do as well. Feedback from my first book has been really great. And I've got a sort of online community that's really supportive, which is really nice. But yeah, essentially finding the structure of the day is really hard. Finding the structure of when you get the words done and things like that is challenging. But it's honestly word vomit for a few months and then read it and fix it for a few months as well.
Just wait one day ago, I've got a great idea for a story, I'm going to write a story. Or how did you kind of decide you're going to write?
That's a really good question. When I was a kid, I wrote something for a coursework for my GCSE. I think I was in year 9 or 10. And it was really short, but I had this idea for something. And my teacher, it got full marks, not to brag, but it got full marks way back in the day. And my teacher told me to finish it. She said it was great. She enjoyed it and said to finish it. And I was like, oh, okay, this is quite cool. So I wrote a lot of it. I still have it somewhere. I'm pretty sure it's terrible because I was only, 14 or whatever. But that was a really cathartic experience to do. I think I like science and things like that. But somewhere in there, I am also a creative. I can't draw, but, I'm a creative. I like to put things out like that. And so, yeah, as I've gotten a bit older, it was a few years ago. Again, I think it was a lockdown thing where I just had this idea for a story based on, I used to sail in Scotland with my now husband. And I just thought of this thing and I just started writing and it just started happening. So for me, it's when it happens, it's great and the words just flow out. And then some days you write no words because nothing's coming. So yeah, there is a bit of that element of just something just...
And do you know what's going to happen? Does the story could develop as you start writing?
That's a debate among writers. You can be a planner or a pantser is what they call it, where you just go for it and see what happens. I'm definitely the second one. I don't plan. I just write and see what happens. I've recently written a scene and finished it and gone, oh my goodness, I don't know where that came from, So those things do just kind of happen. And then you have to go back over it and see where the errors are, where the structure is, and make it actually, good, something that people want to read, which is why having other people support you with that is really important as well. People read my stuff and tell me where it's rubbish, and that helps.
I'm sure it's bad. I've not read your stories. I am going to read them, but it sounds amazing. I just think that so brave to actually publish. I think to write is one thing, but to be brave enough to publish is a different level.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's a bit of a thing to open yourself up to the world. Definitely, it was scarier than I expected it to be, but it's generally been positive reception. And I got my first 2-star review, and it didn't hurt me as much as I thought it would.
That's nervous lit.
Yeah, it was fine. So it's we put these things out into the world, we give it our best, and hey, sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. But on the whole, it's been really positive, and I feel proud of myself for having given it a go.
And is the second book harder to write than the first one?
The second book that I'm working on, I started years ago and I didn't touch. The first book is actually the second book. I wrote them, I'm releasing them backwards for no particular reason. The first one is a collection of short stories, so it was a little easier. It felt like a gateway to opening that up, whereas the next one is a full book, so that's a bit more work on the editing side of things. So that's...
Well, we can't wait. And when are we going to finish that? Do we know?
I don't know. I'm working on it as we speak.
Okay.
Hopefully the next couple of weeks it should be finished-ish, and then we'll see what happens.
And then how long does it take to print?
It depends how you do it. So if you just self-publish like I do, you can do it in an instant. You can publish anything you like tomorrow. It's really, really easy. But I'm actually looking to work with an independent publisher for this next one. So that's a little bit more of a slow process. I'll be honest, I don't really know how it works yet. I'm going to find out when I actually submit it to them.
We will have you back and find out more later.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Toni. As we know, Toni is one of our most loved tutors. You've been with us 3 years now, too.
2. It's been a while, yeah.
And very, very requested. Amazing for psychology, for English, for study skills, and now obviously for writing books.
Clearly, yeah, we'll have to run some kind of course on writing a book.
You never know, it could be out there.
You never know.
Thank you so much. As always, let them fly. It's all about how do we engage our children, how do we engage our families, and how do we just make things happen. So thank you so much, Toni, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.